All right, welcome everybody. So this is part 2 of our video on lesson 9.1. So let's get started right away. All right, find the vertex and the equation and axis of symmetry and the y-intercept. Okay, so we're given a lot of information here, but we're not really at the same time. Okay, so first thing we have to do is understand, what are we looking for? What's the easiest thing to find? Well, if you remember from your previous lesson, we know the y-intercept is the same as the c value, right? So we know from looking at this, our y-intercept of this particular equation is -3. All right, and then what's the next piece that you guys got to go through is, all right, let's look for the axis of symmetry, because the vertex, remember, is the point on the graph where we'd have to figure out exactly where it goes. So on the axis of symmetry, we can figure that out as well, right? Because we know what the a value is. So a, b, and c, right? So our a value is going to be 2, our b value is 4, and our c value is -3, which is why we know that's the y-intercept. Okay, so with your formula, if you guys remember, the formula is going to be for the y-intercept, it's x equals, and then it's negative b over 2a. All right, as you set up on this, no, you set these up. So axis is going to be a negative value here, and it's b. So we got 4 over 2 times whatever a is, which is 2. Okay, so we got 4 over 2 times 2, so our axis of symmetry is -1. Now remember what we talked about. So now we have the axis of symmetry, we're going to work backwards, and now we got to find the vertex. Well, we know that the vertex, all right, the point of that is actually going to be -1, comma, we just don't know what this value is. So we got to find the y value. And how do you do that? You plug this number into this original equation. So that's what we're going to do, right? So we got y equals 2 bracket squared plus 4 and a little bracket -3. Now the brackets represent the letter x, right? And so as we go, now we're going to fill it in with the number that we want, which is -1. So we're going to find out at where x is -1, what is y? And then you just do the math, right? So you got -1 squared is a positive, so 2 times 1 is a 2. And then 4 times the -1 is a -4 minus 3, right? So we got y equals this. So now we have -4 and -3. Add them together. Remember, it's like spending 3, spending 4. You've spent 7. Somebody gives you $2. You've actually only spent what? 5. So your vertex ends up being -1, -5. Hopefully you guys see that, right? Simple math. You just got to plug it in, all right, and do it. Plug and play. All right, y-intercept of this. So let's do the ABC again. So ABCs. All right, this A is a -1. This B is a 6. The C is a 4. Right, so now going off of this information, we know the y-intercept is the C value, which is 4. And then we know the axis of symmetry, right? So the axis is a negative B value, 6. And then it's a 2 times your A, which is -1, right? Now, so negative and negative makes this what? Positive. So this would be 2, this would be 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Right? So that's how you get it. If when in doubt, put this into a calculator and figure it out. All right, so now we know on our vertex, that's the last piece we're looking for, we know the point is 3, comma, something. We just don't know what the back end is. That's where we got to find the y value, right? So we're going to find the y value right now. So it's going to be y equals, hold on, let me get this board set up here. All right, it's going to be y equals, and then it's going to be negative, and then there's some value squared plus 6 with a value here plus 4, right? And then what goes in there? It's going to be the value of 3. So we're going to plug a 3 in here and a 3 in there, right? So we know this is going to be, now this is 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, and then there's a negative on the outside. So it's actually -9 still. And then this is going to be 6 times 3, which is 18, plus 4. Use a calculator if you need to. Figure this out. Okay, this is 18 and 4 is 22, minus 9. Oh my gosh, simple math is killing me. And it's going to be y equals, and I'm going to cheat because I'm embarrassing myself, 13. So my vertex here is 13. Okay, simple enough, right? All right, next thing is as well, last one. ABC. Okay, so it's going to be a 3, a 6, and a -2, right? Okay, so as you go through this, same thing. All right, we're going to make sure you guys get the process here. So the y-intercept is going to be at -2 because that's what the c value is. Your axis of symmetry is going to be a negative. And then remember, it's the b value on top, which is a 6, again, divided by 2 times your a, which is 3. So it actually comes out to be -1 again, right? So there's our -1. So we know our vertex, once again, the x is going to be -1. We just don't know what the y is. We got to find that out by plugging it back in, right? So we're going to go down here again. So it's going to be y equals 3, put a little bracket, squared, plus 6 with a bracket, -2. And then what's going in the bracket is the x value that we're looking for, which is -1 and -1. Now you put this together. So that's going to be a positive one, right? Because -1 times -1 is a positive one. So it'll be 3. It's going to be -6 minus 2. -6 and -2 is -8. Plus 3 is y is -5. So you come up here, and there'd be your vertex. Okay. Ironic, it's the same vertex, ladies and gentlemen, as we had over here. It's kind of cool how even though there are different equations, okay, it comes out to be the same thing. All right. If you have any questions as we're going through this process, please let me know. But remember, a lot of the times when you do the math, it may look like the same thing, but in reality they're not, okay? Because that's got a different y-intercept than this one is. So the graph looks the same, but they're a little bit different. One's higher, one's lower. All right, your turn. Find those 3 pieces together, please. All right, so as we go through this, first thing we want to identify, remember, is going to be A, B, C. All right, so just mark these out. A, B, C, and then we got A, B, C again. Okay, and then you can write your values down as you're going across. So I'm just going to do it now. 2's across the board. -5, 6, and -3. This is -2, -8, and a -2 again, right? So we know our y-intercept here is -2. We know our axis of symmetry is going to be axis is negative, right? And then it's going to be it's the b value, which is -8, and it's going to be 2 times what? The a value, which is -2. Okay, so this is a tricky one because these two negatives would cancel each other out, right? So this would be -8 divided by -4 is actually a what? It's a +2. But because that's a +2 and there's still a negative out front, it's actually needs to end up being -2. Okay? If you were to put this in a calculator, you would actually end up getting -2, but you guys need to know why, okay? Because it's -8 divided by -4 would be a +2. Then you tack on the negative from the very beginning, so it's -2. Okay, hopefully you guys got that. And then the other thing would be the vertex now, right? So your vertex equals -2, comma, we just don't know what the back end is, so that's when you gotta plug it in. Sometimes you might give some very large numbers too, right? So it's -2, and then it's gonna be something squared, -8, and then -2 again, and then you plug in your values, right? So it's going to be -2 and -2 here. So this would be +4 times the -2 is -8. These negative and a negative now, okay, is actually end up being a positive. So this would be +16 -2. So make sure that you guys have your signs as you're going through this thing and set up. So I know -8, 16 is a +8. And then 8 minus 2 would be a 6. So, or it'd be -2 and -8 is 10. Go from there. So y is 6. So there's my vertex. Y-intercept, -5, right? And then your axis is a negative. And then it's the b value, which is which in this case is 6. And then it's times 2 and a -3. Now this one here, this one ended up being a -1, but negative times a negative is a positive, right? So we know that's a +1. And then as you go through, now what you guys got to do in your vertex, right, is on here, your vert is going to be a 1, comma, and then there's a back end to it. So you plug that in again. So you have -3 times 1 plus 6 times 1 minus 5. Now I took the brackets away this time because I want to make sure I got to go a touch faster. So that's negative 3, a 6, and a negative 5. So that ends up being negative 2. Okay, make sure you guys do the math on that. You'll figure it out why. And the last piece here, as we got it set up, the Y-intercept is a 2. And then as you go through, the axis ends up being a negative, and then remember it's B, so it'd be 2, and then it's 2 times 2. So this actually ends up being a negative, it's a 1/2. Sorry, I was gonna go something crazy. That's a negative 1/2. Now you gotta plug that value in. So some of you in here, so my vert, we know it is a negative 1/2, comma, something else, right? So now we do the math on this. So it's going to be 2, you got a 1/2 squared plus 2 times a 1/2 plus 2. All right, so let me do the math on this, make sure I get this one right. So this is going to be a 1. So this is going to be 1 plus 2 is 3. This is squared, so that's a quarter. And then a quarter of 2 is actually, I think, a quarter of 2 is 1/2. Yep, because it would be 1, 2, 3, yep, 1/2. Okay, so then you have 3.5 here, and together it would be, hold on, did I mess that up? Oh yeah, because it's negative, right? Yep, this is negative, so that'd be a negative 2, my bad. I'm like, I think I messed this up. Let I write my notes out. Because this would actually be a negative 1 plus 2. So this would actually end up being a plus 1, right? So you'd end up with 1 plus 1/2 or 1.5. So we'll fix that mistake. That's my bad. Sorry, I make mistakes too, especially when I'm going fast. All right, any questions on that? Please let us know. All right, now we're just going to identify maximum and minimums real quick. Okay, we're going to have to find out what the vertex is. We're going to have to see if it's a maximum or a minimum. And then it depends on what the A value is. So if the A value is positive, they're always going to be minimums. If the A value is negative, it's always going to be a maximum. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to realize here. The A values here, so A, B, C. Okay, A, B, C. So knowing what these are, we're just going to say, is this the maximum or a minimum? So we know this is going to be negative 1, negative 2, and negative 2. This is negative 2, negative 4, and 6. So since these are both negatives, if you go back here, if A is negative, they're going to be what? Maximums. So we know both of these points are going to be maximums. That's the first thing we know. Now we need to find the vertex, okay? The vertex is going to go off the same thing we did before, right? The domain, and because I want to do the vertex because we got to actually find the what of this function. We got to find the, sorry, my board messed up. For all my 4th hour, now you know what time it is. When you're doing this, you're going to have your range, right? So when you're going through this, make sure we got to find our values, right? Our vertex. So our vertex is going to be, first off, you need to get your axis of symmetry. So that's why we got to make sure we do a couple different things on this. All right, so my axis of symmetry is going to be x equals, and it's the negative again, right? And so you know it's going to be negative what? It's going to be b. So it's going to be negative 2, and then it's 2 times a, which is negative 1. So the two negatives actually make each other a positive 1, but it's still a negative 1. Okay, so we know on the vertex, we know our vertex point is negative 1 something, right? So we need that something to get our range. So that's when you plug it back in. Hopefully you guys understand what we're doing here. So we got negative, and then it's squared, minus 2, and then it's minus 2 again, right? So here's where you're going to plug in your values. When you plug these values in here, you guys will get the negative 1, right? And what does that actually answer to? So negative 1 squared is a positive, but then it doesn't matter because you have a negative on the outside. Negative and a negative is a positive, okay? And then you have minus 2 at the end. So what do we have here? We got negative 3 plus 2. So my value is negative 1. So my actual vertex is negative 1, negative 1. Okay, so what that does is if I know that this is a maximum, okay, I know, remember, my domain is all real numbers, but my range, we know, is going to be a y value and a negative 1. Without graphing it, if we know that it's a maximum, right? So if we know that this is going to be a maximum value where it's going to come up and stop, that means every value of y is going to be what? Below that. So what you guys need to understand is that on this case here, negative 1 is going to be the greatest value, right? It's going down. That's why we need to identify what a maximum and minimum are. So on this one, it's going to be the same thing, right? So first you got to find the vertex, or the axis of symmetry. So we got to go x equals. This is a really good process, and you guys are making sure we're going to, it's a really good process in making sure you guys can do a lot of formula-based math and a lot of other slightly complicated math as well. So negative 4, 2, and then this is a negative 2, right? So negative 2, negative 4, and negative 4 is a positive 1. Then you got a negative again, so the same thing. The axis of symmetry is negative 1. So we know our vertex is a negative 1, comma, but we don't know what the last piece is, so you got to plug that in again, right? So we got negative 2, then it's squared, minus 4, and then it's going to be plus 6, right? So you plug your values in. Negative 1, end up with negative 2. That's going to be a plus 4, plus 6. It ends up being 8. So our vertex is negative 1, 8. So same thing again. Our domain is all real numbers. Our range ends up being a y value and an 8. And it's going to be every value under 8, right? Because this is the vertex is negative 1 over 8 up. So if I were to graph it out here, you guys would know that. And the graph is going to peel down from there, right? Identify if is this a minimum or a maximum value. Then state your domain and range of the function, ladies and gentlemen. All right, hopefully you guys know that this is now a minimum. So what this means is that this graph goes like this, right? So it's a U. So now what you want to do is identify your pieces. ABC is going to be a 2, negative 4, and a negative 1. So we're going for our axis of symmetry. It's going to be a negative B. So it's negative 4 over 2 times A, which is 2. Negative and negative is going to be a positive. So now we know our vertex is a 1, but we don't know what the back end is. So we'll do it again. Plug the value in. So it's going to be 2 times 1 squared minus 4 times 1 minus 1, right? So this is going to be 2 minus 4 minus 1. That would be negative 3. Okay, so if we know our domain is all real numbers, like it always is, my range is going to be a y and a negative 3. But this is a minimum. So if it's a minimum, that means this is going to be the point right here is going to be, this is going to be 1 comma negative 3. So if that's the case, that means y is going to be every value what? Greater than negative 3. So hopefully you guys can see that in your minds. All right, so this is the last piece of the puzzle, graphing these equations, all right? First, we're going to do a couple steps. Find the equation, vertex, y-intercept, symmetry, and then connect the points with a smooth curve. This will go pretty quick. It's not a very hard little setup here. And it's a drawing, a picture. Remember, axis of symmetry is negative b, this is for my own sake, 2a, right? All right, so as we move through this, it's going to be a process where you got to make sure we're going to show you 2 examples. All right, axis of symmetry. So we got A, B, C. Okay, so we got 1, 4, and 3. Same thing we've been doing all throughout this process. So it's going to be x equals a negative, and then it's b over 2 times a. So my axis of symmetry is negative 2. Simple enough. Find the vertex. Okay, so we know the vertex is going to be negative 2 something else, right? And then, is it a maximum or a minimum? If it's a positive number, which this is, that would be a what? A minimum, right? So this is a minimum. So, and then we have to do the little equation here. So it's going to be x, whoops, not x. So we're going with a space squared plus 4 plus 3, like that. Plug in your negative 2's. Negative 2, negative 2. So this is going to be what? 4 minus 8 plus 3. And then this is going to be negative 1. So we know our point is going to be negative 2, 1, 2, negative 1. So there's our first point. All right, now what we're going to do is find the y-intercept. Simply enough. The y-intercept, ladies and gentlemen, is what number? 3. 1, 2, 3. Oops. Now, here's what I want to make sure you guys understand. Graph it. Here's what I want you guys to imagine in your head. This is perfect symmetry. What I mean by that, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm technically supposed to be able to draw a dotted line right down the middle of the graph, and I fold it over. So if I fold this over, the other point, if you guys can see, is going to be how many over here. If you go from this line over to here, it's 1, 2. So if I go to the left, 1, 2. There's my other point. Because remember, if you want to fold this over, it would fold over on top of each other. Do I want you to do any more points? The answer is what? No. Now, if I'm Alex, if you need to find something, then what you would do is you would graph out 2 of these points, and then you guys need to be able to visually see this cuts it in half. So say, for example, if this is a point here, if 0, negative 1 is a point, basically what you guys need to understand is that if you were to flip this graph over, there would be a same point right here, just like there's a point here and a point there. All right, so there you go, and that's it. That's all we're doing on this one. All right, we graphed it. Yay, smooth curve. You only need 3 points. If you need 5, figure out the other one by plugging in a value that's close to the axis of symmetry, and I'll explain that in a second. So this one here is the same way. ABC. Negative 1, 5, negative 2. Your axis of symmetry is a negative value, and then it's going to be B. So 5 over 2 times A, which is negative 1. And so a negative and a negative is a positive, so this ends up being 5 over 2, or 2.5, right? So we know the axis of symmetry here is going to be 2.5. All right, we also know that this is, again, a minimum, because it's a positive number. All right, so now you got to do the tricky part. So you got to put this in to your formula. So this is a negative. Oh wait, it's a negative, so that's not a minimum, this is a maximum. That means I did my notes wrong. Right, yep, all right, that's a maximum. Okay, so what you guys need to know, if that's a maximum there, now what you have to figure out is the rest of this value, right? So on here, when you plug this in, you have a value of 2, or if you want to go, we'll go 5 over 2. 5 over 2 squared, and then it's a negative, right? And then it's plus 5, and then it's 5 over 2, and then it's minus 2. And wow, that's horribly looking. All right, so let me redraw that. Let me go down here and let me fix this. Okay. So let's do this again, right? Okay, so it is going to be, it's a negative value of x. All right, so it is negative, and then it's 5 over 2 squared, and then it's going to be plus 5, and then it's 5 over 2 again, and then it's minus 2. Now, I struggle personally with these things as well, okay? So what I would want you guys to do is grab a calculator if you have one, okay? And then when you grab a calculator, you're going to want to put these things in and try to figure it out, right? So I know 5 over 2 squared would be 25 over 4. That's great. So let me see. This would be a negative 25 over 4. How do I know that? Because if I multiply these together, 5 times 5 is 25 over 4, negative. Okay, and then this is going to be a plus. Come on, calculator. And then this would be, you multiply this in, so this would be 25 over 2. And then it's minus 2. Now I don't know what all that stuff is, so what I have to do is on my calculator here, and mine's letting me down. Come on, let's go. All right, so on here, ladies and gentlemen, I'd go on here, it'd be negative 25 divided by 4. All right, plus 25 divided by 2, and then it's going to be minus 2. So it comes out to be 17 divided by 4, which actually is close to being a number of, hold on, this is a harder one, 2 and a quarter. Okay, so it comes out to be 2.25. So it comes out to be 2 and a quarter. All right, so what I want you guys to do is now on here is make sure you have your setup. Make sure that as you go through here, you'll figure this out. So my y-axis would be 2.5 and 2 and a quarter. Okay, and then you would graph that accordingly, right? So you come over here, and if I go 2.5, so I go over 1, 2.5, and I go up 2 and a quarter. So it'd be probably right about there would be my point. Now I know this is a weird point as you're going through it, but you guys kind of get the drift and you'll be able to figure this out. All right, any questions on this? Okay, and then you ask, what is my y-intercept? My y-intercept is actually a what? 1, 2, a negative 2. Now, here's the same thing. This would be a simple process. If this is a half, 2.5, and you're at a 0, what is 2.5 times 2? It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there is my actual graph. All right, my y-intercept is negative 2. Okay, so we said it was a maximum. It comes out to be a actual maximum. And then what you guys would understand is that your imaginary line would come through the middle, and then it actually goes this way and creates like an upside down T. All right, you guys do the very last one real quick. All right, this function, same way. Graph it out, give me the A, B, C values, right? So you guys know that this is going to be x equals, and then the value is going to be B, so it'll be negative 6 over 2 times A, which is 3, and it's a negative. So this is going to be a positive 1, because negative times a negative is a positive. Or yeah, negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so we know that it's a 1, so that means we know our vertex is 1. And since this is a positive number, we know this is going to be a minimum. All right, and then as you go from here, so let me fix this. This is a 1 comma. And then as you go from here, you guys would fill in the blanks, right? So we know it's going to be 3 times 1 squared. So this is going to be 3. And it's going to be minus 6 plus 2. So if I put in a 1 up there, it doesn't really change the equation. So that'd be 3 plus 2 is 5. So my vertex is going to be negative 1. So I'm going over 1, down negative 1. I know it's going to be a minimum, so I know I'm getting a U. And it says find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is a 2. 1, 2. So if this is my vertex, there's my y-intercept. Or there's my y-intercept. I go over 1 because remember, there's an imaginary line that splits this down the middle. You go from there. That's it. Work on the homework. Hard, kind of complicated lesson. It's a long lesson, but what this is make sure you guys can identify the different pieces, the big takeaways. Make sure you can find the axis of symmetry. Make sure you know what a vertex is. Make sure you know, ladies and gentlemen, whether it's a maximum or a minimum, because those things will be asked of you as you move forward in life. Right? Concentrate, work on these. If you have any questions, come ask us by email or when we have our class time. And if you have any questions, let us know, but we'll be there for you soon. Miss you guys.